All right, we have been on the series on the power sector all the while. Now, there are lots of technicalities when it comes to what is involved in generation, what is involved in transmission, what is involved in distribution and all of that. But Nigerians don't want to bother themselves with the technicalities. Let there be
all
light.
they're concerned about is, look, when I switch off my, turn on my switch, let the light just come on. Isn't it amazing? It really is instructive that the creator himself, before he started creating anything, he said, let there be light, which means light is absolutely important. If any society, any economy is going to develop, there better be light. And so if we really are serious about developing this country, moving Nigeria to where it really should be, and if we're just paying lip service to the whole idea of, electricity and providing enough electricity for Nigerians, then there is a problem. And the fact that we're still talking about 5,000 megawatts,
that's just the average.
Nigeria, million people?
Since the past 55 years of independence of the country, 5,000 has been the highest, and that was in March.
And to think that we have an installed capacity of about 10,000, and yet we have not even been able to meet that mark.
All right, we'll certainly be talking about this.
And according to Lokwe's report there, the missing link, the weakest link seems to be transmission, the TCN, and that's the one that government still holds on to.
All right. Now we have the former head of Transmission Company of Nigeria in our Abuja studio, and we'll be talking to him right now to give us an update as to how these things are. Now, it's good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, Godwin Osakwe, engineer Godwin Osakwe. Thanks for joining us.
Now, let's start it this way. We had an analyst earlier on about a day ago that said that megawatts being generated in the country is about 8,000 megawatts already as it is, but it cannot be transmitted. It can't be given out because the infrastructure to actually send out about that 8,000 megawatts is not on ground. Can you give us a picture of how maybe we had analysts on the report earlier that said that some of the equipment are obsolete and all of that. Can you tell us how inadequate the transmission equipment are, that they cannot handle what is being generated?
Yeah, well, the facts on the ground is that the transmission, the wheeling capacity as have been defined by TCN, is roughly 5,500. This was agreed to when simulations based on the capacity available, were done. That is what we call N-1 contingency. That does not mean if you don't want to meet that criteria, you cannot do more than that. I know the facilities on the ground can definitely do more than that 5,500. But for safe and reliable operation, they probably put it at 5,500. But I know the facilities on ground, and with new commission is being done by NIPP, we should be well above that figure now.
When you say we should be well above that figure now, are you saying that in the nearest future we really should be seeing what figure are you putting to it?
Yeah, well, when the NIPP intervention started, we did the design. We identified projects that we needed to complete, and if they were completed, we should be doing 10,000 megawatt comfortably. Now, some of these projects are near completion. Some are 90%, some are 99%. But unfortunately, with the power system and transmission line, unless it's 100%, you cannot use it. So there are uncompleted projects, around the network that if government focuses on them and completes them, I don't see why we should not be doing, we should not have a capacity to wheel more than 8,000. All this has been done during the commencement of NIPP. But I've left the system some few years ago, so I cannot for sure say which are those projects that are still outstanding. But I think the focus from government should be this project that was started at the beginning of NIPP. Can we reevaluate them? As soon as we get them completed, I'm very sure we should be doing more than 8,000 megawatts.
All right, Engineer Osakwe, just stay with us as we, throw some more light on this. Now, the transmission section of the electricity value chain is lagging behind. As you heard earlier, very little investments have come in since the power sector reforms, and the challenges faced by TCN continue to hinder the realization of reliable and stable power supply envisaged by the reforms.
Now, the transmission grids are an integral part of the electricity value chain, and operation of the electricity transmission network is vested in the Transmission Company of Nigeria. Now, all transmission lines in the power system are made to transport energy from power generation stations to distribution stations before the electricity is taken down to consumers.
Transmission Company of Nigeria, that's the TCN, was incorporated in November 2005, emerging from the defunct National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, as a product of the merger of the transmission and operations sectors in April 2004. Now, being one of the 18 unbundled business units under the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, the company was issued a transmission license in 2006. Now, TCN licensed activities include electricity transmission, system operation, and electricity trading.
Now, the TCN is the only successor company in the electricity value chain that is still under the control of government. But the company has a management contract with Manitoba Hydro International Limited, a Canadian utility firm. Now, TCN's operations cover the whole country. It is divided into 8 transmission regions that contain various work centers with a national control center and 3 regional control centers.
TCN's core mandate broadly covers the operation and management of high voltage, that's 330/132 kV transmission system assets, generation dispatch functions, system operations, and provision of open access transmission services on regulated tariff. I'm sure that sounds like Greek to many of our viewers. But the TCN has transmission capabilities of about 6 gigawatts. Nigeria's transmission infrastructure is made up of approximately 6,680 kilometers of 330 kilovolt lines, and that's 7,780 kilometers of 132 kV lines.
Wow. That's really huge. But in what may be described as the greatest achievement of the Transmission Company of Nigeria in February, energy generation peaked by 5,074 megawatts, making it the highest maximum daily energy wheeled nationwide by TCN to distribution load centers. Now, the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, says Nigeria is seriously considering the decentralization of its power transmission network into segments which could be concessioned to private operators to invest in, manage and charge transmission fees.
Okay, now that's a truly new development. But let me ask Engineer Godwin Osakwe right now. Yes, I mean, after the privatization and all of that and unbundling of the, is it NEPA, PHCN, government insists on holding on to the TCN, the Transmission Company of Nigeria, and obviously it still remains the weakest link in, delivering electricity to households. How sound is this decision really for government to hold on to the transmission aspect of the value chain of electricity? And what exactly are their fears?
And when it's been managed by a private company, a Canadian company.
Indeed, Manitoba.
Yeah. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, basically, I think our problem is that we're not working on the strategic plans. When new government comes in, there are new issues, there are new policies, and then we kind of sidestep what has been done instead of trying to achieve optimal value from what had been on. I can tell you categorically that if all the transmission lines we started at the beginning of the NIPP intervention had been completed, the network would not be where it is now. I don't subscribe to the idea of breaking the network and concessioning different. That would probably be a throwback. That's not the strategic development. Every country whose network had developed had grown as a grid. So what we should do is to find out what is preventing the grid from running efficiently before we start talking of breaking it up. Even networks in Europe, they were all built as grids, and they had interconnection to associated grids of other networks, so that those grids can support themselves. That's precisely what we have. We should create a solid grid, a backbone grid that has a mesh, which means you can connect to anywhere. You can break it during operation, if you have problem, but it should still be reconnectable. That is what we have been working on. Our grid was developed, patterned along the British grid. And I think we should optimize all the facilities we have put in that grid before we start talking of breaking it up.
Okay. Now,
it's being managed by the Canadians because, that is a government policy. But I believe there's enough experience on ground here to manage this grid by Nigerians. So it's for government to call back or have a way of interfacing with people who have been running this grid. These are Nigerians, we're all around. Why can't a think tank be set up so that we can all look at the problem the grid is having, where are the gaps, and advise government? And if they give government 2 years and say if it doesn't improve, then maybe government can talk of fractionalizing the grid. I don't think we should change the policy midstream.
Okay.
Because we've not been able to achieve what we started, and we're starting a new one which we don't know the end result.
All right,
let
Engineer
us
Osakwe.
do things in a proper fashion.
Yeah, Engineer Osakwe, we remember the days of NEPA and then the transformation into PHCN generally, and up until now where there are fragments of different companies handling different things. Now, can you give us generally the difference? What has been the improvement in power transmission so far, if we have to pitch them against maybe the quantum, or how effective this system has been between that time and now?
Yeah, basically the way you judge the behavior of the system is how many system collapses do you have in a particular cycle. There are criteria for judging, and whatever generation is coming in, if it gets to 6,000 with a bit of hiccups here and there, I think we should be able to wheel it. I have seen improvements. Some major lines have been completed. A line from Ajaokuta coming to Abuja has been one of the stabilizing influences. It was done by the NIPP. So we create corridors, and that is what a backbone is. You create different corridors. You cannot have only one corridor bringing power from the south to the north. If that corridor, if there's any problem happens there, there will be separation of the network, and then power failure. So we need to build in where we have single lines. We should make them dual, so that if one is out, the other one will provide capacity. These are the things we should look at, find out where these gaps are, close these gaps, and I'm sure we'll have a robust network from there.
Well, you are a player in that sector, and I want to believe that you understand, the technicalities involved. What exactly are these gaps? And what would be your recommendations? I mean, you talk about gaps, those areas that need to be fixed. What really are those areas that need, attention very quickly?
Yeah, I can, put my finger on jobs, transmission lines that we started as far back as, 2005, 2006. Some, for reasons of wayleave, consumer difficulties, as soon as you want to build a line, people start building their houses underneath the route, so that compensation, will become, another burden for you. Some of those lines, I think we should evaluate them. We did a study. That's the advantage of having a transmission grid network. You do a simulation, put possibilities, and you see the behavior. Computers do that for us. They have different programs. So by the time you see what will give you the optimal performance, that's the one that you start investing in. So let's sit back, look at all those things, call the experts. All Nigerians, there are people who have run the network people who are senior to you, people who are junior to you. Let's all sit together and look at where we are. You know, that way we'll be able to say, I think this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do. I can tell you there are certain lines, when we complete them now, you will find the network will become more robust. I think that's the area government should look at now.
Okay, now, Engineer Osakwe, before we let you go, some analysts have talked about the fact that some of these equipment are obsolete and they are no longer as functional or as optimal. What is the ideal lifespan of some of these equipment before they can be replaced or before they can be changed?
If an equipment does not, you know, have, it doesn't explode or something happens to it, transmission lines, you know, have a lifespan of 50 years. You know, transformers, maybe 30 years, 35 years, circuit breaker, those are the key equipment in the network. These are 330 kV networks. Most of them have, you know, some equipments have gone beyond their lifespan, no doubt. But it's for a transmission network if funding is available. And I think that's the danger. When people say you want to concession it, you want to bring in people, it is the most fund demanding section of the power chain. And even the ones that have been privatized, you know, people are running around looking for money. They can't do this, they don't have money, they need to charge customers. So the only place where we think government should invest and loans can come in is the transmission network.
And speaking of funding, let me come in very quickly before we let you go, Engineer Osakwe. The World Bank, you know, has threatened to withhold its 300 million or so, you know, funding to the transmission grid if government insists on holding on to the transmission, you know, aspect of power. What's your take on this, and what would you advise government to do, especially as it needs funding seriously?
Yeah, well, basically, it's not, you know, we work, African Development Bank, World Bank, you know, they give us loans. All transmission networks that I know that have been developed were developed from loans that they got, you know, bilateral. South African network, even the British grid, Georgia network. So why should it be, you know, Nigeria's case that you say unless they go private, you know, they're not going to? I don't subscribe. We need to get this network to a particular level of strength before we start talking of, you know, privatizing it. I think people should tell me transmission network that have been privatized that are successful. A growing transmission network cannot be privatized. A transmission network has to be developed by government, and it gets to a particular age. It becomes like it's a matured network. Then you can start privatizing branches of it. You create merchant network that private people can run, you know, but not an entire network. So I frankly don't subscribe to it. I don't understand the concept that World Bank says unless it's privatized, they're not going to give us that money. I mean, for goodness sake. We should not be held to ransom. It's not right, because other countries have received loans from which they develop their bulk network. All right, we should do so here.
Yeah, Engineer Osakwe, we know that from the eyes of the average Nigerian, like we said earlier on, all they want is light in their houses and let the industries run so they can do different things. Now, you have been in the inside, knowing how government has been trying the effort to invest in money, bring in this, technical that. Now, from your assessment, even though you're not inside as it is, but at least you still have your ears, from the investment and the workings in government, how feasibly soon can Nigerians really have relatively stable light from what your assessment?
Yeah, well, you saw what happened when we were able to do 5,074. As soon as generation came in, everything was plugged into the system, and we were able to send it to wherever they were meant to go. I believe it can be done and be done better. So, but one thing I can say is that we have some problem with completing projects. And I think that is the challenge government has to face. Call experts. Call people who have been involved there. Maybe we can have a think tank that takes each of those projects. And I can bet you, before the year runs out, some of these projects with limited funds, invested in them, we can complete them. And if we do complete them, everybody will see the difference. But we are scattering, it's like getting water and, in a bucket and you throw it. We are scattering our resources into too many things. So we're not able to achieve simple things that we think by now should have been completed.
Engineer Godwin Osakwe, thank you so much for your insight and, of course, your input on TVC Breakfast this morning.